Hello, hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Reese. I talk about books, I talk about reading, I talk about writing here. Today, video looks a little different. I'm at my writing desk. I am going to bring you along with me for a writing vlog. A day of writing, which is actually like a half day of writing, because let's be real, we have other things to do. Yeah, this is writing vlog 2 for my channel. Kind of a different thing. We'll be back to more videos about books. That's what I usually talk about here, what I'm reading. But this story, I'm working on a short story in this day of writing, and I've worked on it before. In my first writing vlog, I was in like early drafting phase, and now I have a first draft, which I really feel good about, and I'm working on some edits, some feedback that I got in a short story, kind of like 5-week writing course. I got feedback from other writers in the group and our teacher. And so I'm gonna work through those edits today, and then tomorrow morning I have to turn this in. My plan right now is to do a few 45-minute writing sprints and then take a break after each one of those, maybe check in here, just share a little update about how it went. And then what I'll do is have a little voiceover chat where I'm talking about my process of writing, while you're watching the sprint, because I think some things have evolved, some things I'm learning about my writing that I found interesting, and I want to share that. I think it might be helpful for someone, or just honestly helpful for me to look back at this and see how things have evolved. Of course, I'm going to talk a little bit about things I've read that have influenced what I'm working on. So let's get writing. I began this sprint reviewing a list of the edits I needed to make. And when I say edits here, what I mean are story edits. For me, this is like larger structural edits, adding scenes, things like that, versus individual line edits, changing words or making things sound better. I'm still in early draft mode, so I'm letting things be kind of bad, knowing that I can come back in and make things sound better, but I need to get the core of the story to a good place. My list of edits includes creating a sense of time and place. This is a historical story. I've always known that. It's set in the distant past, and I've also always known that it was happening somewhere in Europe. But my teacher gave me some good feedback, and she told me it wasn't really clear where and when this was happening. So I'm adding a couple of subtle nods into the story about this, maybe in dialogue or descriptions, to make this clearer for the reader. Because while I'm seeing it in my head in a certain time and place, it probably needs to be just a touch more descriptive. Amping things up, also known as making it longer. There is a core dynamic at play in this story, a core tension, and some of the feedback I received was to just amp this up, make the baddies in this story badder, if you will, support this narrative that's happening even more. For this story, this means I'm gonna be adding scenes, and this is honestly gonna be the hardest part for me because adding new scenes will inevitably impact things in other scenes. There will be timeline changes. I'm a little scared of this part, but I know it will make the story better, so I definitely want to do it. For reference, my last draft was at just about 3,000 words, and I think this story will probably end up being closer to 7,000. So basically doubling or more. My teacher said 8,000 words was kind of a cap for short stories, so I definitely don't want to go over that. I don't think I will, but this is just a good guidepost for me. And lastly, I need to revise the climax of the story. very close to the end. I wrote that part last, and while I knew what was going to happen pretty clearly, it's basically a little abrupt because I just ran out of time when I was writing it. It probably needs to be infused with some of that tension that I mentioned earlier. I think plot-wise, it's pretty dramatic and shocking, but character-wise, it needs some oomph. There are things I can improve on, I know. It'll just make it that much better. And we're back. We're done with sprint 1. And, yeah, what did we do in sprint 1? I solved one of the things that I had to do, and I feel pretty good about it. And then I kind of just went through this story and thought about where I would add in these new scenes and like what information needs to be included in those. Let's see. I think I need to include 2 scenes only. And then in the last, like the climax scene, which is basically the last like big scene, I need to, I don't want to say rewrite it, but I need to write like, I need to basically rewrite it. I think there are things happening in it that are good, but yeah, it's not enough, and like one core thing kind of has to change. So yeah, but I think the 2 scenes that I have to write, well, actually, I lied. There's 3 scenes that I need to add, but one of them, oh no, I'm right. Yeah, there's 2 scenes. I don't know how people who write books do this, because this is like a short story, and I'm like losing track of like what has to happen where. What was I saying? 2 scenes that I need to add, but 2 scenes that I need to add and then rewrite the climax scene. But the good news is that one of the 2 scenes that I'm adding, I think I'm gonna reuse something that I wrote like in an early draft that I ended up cutting because I didn't feel like it was necessary, and then get feedback on that, because it's basically like the first scene. Like there's an introduction paragraph, which I love and I don't really want to change, so yeah, and then there's this next scene, and I'm curious to know if it's going to change things too much, adding this new scene in. So anyways, let's go into sprint number 2. Let's talk about my influences for this story and how it has evolved. The idea initially came to me in a session of my weekly writing group, and I knew that it was an interesting premise and an interesting, inciting incident. I was super excited to write it. It came to me very clearly. I haven't looked at that initial piece of writing in a while. I probably will once I'm done with this story, just to see how far it's come. Right from that initial session, I also knew it was going to be set in the past, and I was pretty sure it was during the medieval era, but I wasn't sure exactly where or the personality of the main character. I was sort of flipping back and forth between them being like super strong and like someone you like, or somebody you kind of don't like. I knew she was a woman, but I wasn't sure what her deal was, let's just say. Then after this, I probably spent a few weeks dipping in and out of the story, rewriting this one scene a few different times, trying a few different settings, basically just trying to figure out where this was and who this was happening to. Then I figured it might be helpful to read a book that was set in this time period. So that's when I picked up Matrix by Lauren Groff. And I was like, oh, this is really helpful. That was back in March, which, wow, that it feels like yesterday, but it's actually like over 2 months ago, and I'm gonna have an existential crisis about it. Okay. Then I watched Conclave and it just clicked. I knew what was happening and I knew who my main character was. That movie is excellent. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. Not only is it just a great story, the dialogue, but visually stunning. Okay, and then for good measure, I read Lapvona by Ottessa Moshfegh, which is also set in the medieval era, and there are religious things involved. And that's when things started picking up steam for me. Little details started becoming even more clear. And it happened to be about the time when I enrolled in this short story class, and so I had some extra accountability, and the writing really ramped up from there. So I would say those influences, drop in a dash of George Saunders and Marie-Helene Bertino, and you have what I've been cooking with for this story. Basically, I'm writing a story I would want to read, and I guess hopefully other people would want to read it one day too. Welcome back. I had some lunch. I have, I think, one more sprint left in me that I can do today. What I've really been realizing over the past, few months, is that just showing up is what gets the work done. That makes sense, right? I'm in the middle of writing a new scene. I think I know where it's going. I feel good about it. And let's dive back in. This is me trying to figure out one sentence. On one hand, I kind of love this type of writing, focusing on like one sentence and like really crafting and perfecting it. But I also kind of hate this because, while I love powerfully and well-written sentences, I also recognize at this stage in the game, this is probably me procrastinating on adding in those new scenes because I'm scared of them. Anyway, what I also wanted to talk about here is a little bit about what I listen to when I write. For a long time, I used to write listening to music, often movie scores, so like Hans Zimmer. I have a ton of other recommendations and like composers and soundtracks and scores that I listen to if you are curious. I love talking about that. But yeah, it's really helpful for me to listen to music like this because it puts me in the emotional zone. Certain songs just like, I get into an emotional state and I can feel what my characters are feeling. But I do recognize that it can be hard for me to write when I'm in that state because I'm just like caught up in the emotions of it. So I'm learning what actually helps me write the best is brown noise. Just a good old-fashioned brown noise playlist on Spotify with over-the-ear headphones. Brown noise is kind of like white noise, but it's at a lower frequency, and to me it feels more grounding. It's like more like waves or thunder. It feels more natural. So my current method is listening to my movie score playlist that I made specifically for this story while I'm doing things like driving or walking or folding laundry, where my mind can sort of wander. And that's when I sometimes have new ideas for the story. But when I'm actually writing these ideas, brown noise. Try it out. I highly recommend. Popping back in here to say thank you so much for watching. Here's me realizing that I have so much work to do still on this story. I hope you are enjoying what you are reading or writing. I will see you in the next video.